I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining the second installment of the NEHA Body Art webinar series, Understanding Body Art Tools. Today, we're going to hear from some industry and regulatory body art experts to gain a better understanding of body art tools. Our panelists today are Piercer and Florida Environmental Health Association Executive Director, Mike Crea, a Senior Environmental Health Specialist, Heather Woods, and tattoo artist, Ben Shaw. They're here to discuss the common tools used by piercers and highlight the differences between single-use and reprocessed instruments, explore the components of tattoo machines and their post-tattoo processing, and will help guide you on what to look for when inspecting tools in a shop. And I'm Sadie Shervheim, a project coordinator for the National Environmental Health Association, and it is my pleasure to facilitate today's webinar. Just as a note, this webinar, including the chat, is being recorded. So if you're not comfortable with this, you may disconnect at this time. I'm gonna go ahead and share and we can get started. All right. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. All participants are in listen-only mode, but we do invite you to utilize the chat throughout the presentation to connect with fellow attendees. We will have time for questions at the end and ask that you please write your questions into the Q&A box specific for questions, not the general chat, and then we can do our best to answer as many questions as we can as time permits, and we will address any after the webinar for ones we can't get to. All right, but without further ado, I am pleased to welcome our first speaker, Mike Crea. I'll pass that over to you and we can get started. All right, Mike, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you, Sadie, for the nice introduction. My name is Michael Crea. I am the Executive Director of the Florida Environmental Health Association. I'm also the owner of Z-Edge Tattoo and Body Piercing in Sarasota, Florida, and I've been piercing for about 27 years now. So I can control the screen. This is about the sterilization of equipment used in a body art procedure. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about just body piercing tools during this webinar. A little bit of a disclaimer. There's more than one ways to skin a cat, all right? So there's more than one way and more than one method to clean and sterilize reusable tools. We don't have the time today to examine all of them, but everything we're going to go over today is based on the NEHA Model Body Art Code and how my shop personally sterilizes reusable tools. No matter the method that you use and the steps that you use to get there, the overall goal is to clean and properly sterilize all reusable tools. It's good to note that individual states and some individual counties across the country have various rules and regulations that must be followed when a piercer is operating within their jurisdiction. Section 8.5 of the Body Art Model Code states that all reusable instruments are to be decontaminated and sterilized after each use in a sterilization room or sterilization area. Furthermore, it goes on to define a sterilization area means a room or enclosed area set apart and used only to clean, decontaminate, and sterilize instruments. So this should be a separate room in the facility where all they're doing in this room and at this sink is cleaning and prepping instruments to be put into the autoclave for sterilization. It's not a hand washing sink. It's not a tattoo artist sink. It's not your bathroom sink. It is a sink away from pedestrian access that is only used for the purposes of prepping tools and cleaning them prior to sterilization. So what are some reusable tools that you're going to see when you're doing body piercing inspections? The first thing, most common, is clamps and forceps. Clamps are used to hold the skin that will be pierced. It helps reduce the margin of error when performing a body piercing because it holds the skin like nice and tight when you are doing the body piercing procedure. Here you have a picture of a sponge clamp that's used for a tongue piercing. Another type of clamp is called a Pennington clamp. It's used to hold the skin that's going to be pierced. We'll use these ones for navels and eyebrows and nipples and lips, stuff like that. And this is what a Pennington clamp looks like. It's kind of like an upside down triangle. This is a sponge clamp again. You can see the head a little bit better. It's more of a circle tip on it. This one I would use for tongue piercings, or sometimes we'll use them for like outer labia piercings, but that's generally all that the sponge clamps are being used for. Hemostats. I love hemostats. I call them like the piercer's best friend tool. Uh, they act like a little mini hand, so you can get jewelry in like hard to reach places. For those of us piercers that have bigger hands, it's real hard to kind of screw balls onto like a date piercing or a rook piercing sometimes. So having that hemostat that you can get into like nice tight little areas with that jewelry and just kind of hold it nice and tight so you can screw balls on, it comes in really, really handy. So I definitely call that the piercer's best friend. That's probably the most common tool that all of us use is going to be hemostats. Receiving tubes. Receiving tubes are used to catch a needle at the exit of a piercing. We'll use them for nostrils, inner ears. We'll use them for Prince Albert, for genital piercings for guys. We'll use them for genital piercings for hoods for girls. It eliminates the chance of puncturing and cutting the skin on the inside of the nostril, the ear, or a genital, because the needle will go through the skin into that tube, and that tube will catch it on the other end. So this way, it reduces the chance of the customer getting poked or prodded, or the piercer getting poked by the needle. Then we'll have tapers. Tapers are used to stretch a hole from one size to another. It's used to make the transfer of jewelry easy with the help of the pin or a threaded end, and they come in a variety of sizes and tips. So the picture here on the left, those are generally for like ear stretching. They'll start out small at one end, and then it slowly goes to the size of the jewelry that you're going to put in at the other end. On the right-hand side, you can see that they have little tips on the end of some of them. So we have a lot of 16 gauge tapers and 14 gauge tapers that'll have a threaded end or like a little pin end, and the jewelry will actually fit right on the back of it. And that helps insert the jewelry nice and easy when you are doing a piercing. So what are some reusable tools that we have here on the tray? This here is set up for a rook piercing and a date piercing. So like, what are some reusable tools that we're gonna see here? The first one is a hemostat. You can see the hemostat there on the left-hand side, and we'll use that to hold the jewelry. Then you have a receiving tube. The receiving tube is going to catch the needle at the other end, so it reduces the chance of the piercer getting poked by the needle or the customer getting poked by the needle in an area that they don't want to be poked by. And then you have the taper. There is a reusable taper in there as well. So you can use the tapers more than once. They're not a needle. It doesn't have a sharp point on it. It has like a little tiny blunt end on it. So it doesn't actually cut the skin. So you can reuse the tapers as well. Again, this is a setup for conch piercing, and you can see here that the only reusable tool here is going to be the receiving tube. Everything else on here is going to be one-time use, and we're going to throw it away. So when we do sterilize tools, there is a color changing indicator on every package. So you can see if the indicator has changed color. If you look really closely, it says that when it is exposed to steam, it turns to like a dark gray color. And you can see here that these did turn into a dark gray color. You also want to check the package for loss of integrity. If it's torn, punctured, burnt, wet, it needs to be repackaged and re-sterilized immediately. So all of those things will be considered a break in sterility, and you don't want to have that when you are piercing somebody. So you always want to check and see if it's torn or punctured. If it has burnt, sometimes they get burnt in the back of the package. The paper gets burnt, so that would be considered non-sterile. We would have to open it up, reprocess it, and repackage it. So the first step in cleaning our tools in order so that we can reuse them is to put it into an ultrasonic. This is an ultrasonic on the left-hand side. You'll use that in conjunction with an enzymatic cleaner. An enzymatic cleaner is a cleaner that is going to eat away at all the organic material on the tools. So you only need like a little tiny bit of enzymatic cleaner because it's a concentrate to that size ultrasonic there. So you put the enzymatic cleaner and water into the basket. I mean, it's into the ultrasonic. You put your tools into the basket, and that basket suspends in the water. The ultrasonic is like an overglorified dishwasher for your tools. It does not decontaminate them. It does not sterilize them, but it just cleans all of the gross debris off of them. So any extra blood that's on there, or pus, or lube, or anything that's on those tools, that enzymatic cleaner will eat away at it. The ultrasonic sends sound vibrations through the water, and it makes little bubbles, and those little bubbles will pulsate off the tools, and when they pop, they create a vacuum, and they suck off all the gross debris that's on the tools. So the enzymatic cleaner starts eating away at it, the ultrasonic starts pummeling it with little tiny bubbles, and those bubbles pop, it sucks all the garbage off the tools. And then when it comes out of the ultrasonic, we have to rinse them off and let them dry. So you can see here, we are rinsing the tools once they come out of the ultrasonic. Once they are rinsed off, because you have to rinse off all the enzymatic cleaner that's on there, you need to lay them out to dry. You never want to package up wet tools because the package can rip when you're packaging it up, or some of the water can splash and get into your eyes, or get into a cut, or get into your clothes. So we don't want any contaminated water getting all over us. So we always want to make sure we lay them out to dry first before we package them up. Once we package them up, we have to sterilize them by a steam autoclave. The autoclave has to be a front-loading steam autoclave approved for use in the United States. It has to check for time, temperature, and pressure, and also have a dry cycle. So all the autoclaves should have time, temperature, and pressure gauges, and then also have a dry cycle on them. When they come out, they should be marked with the date of sterilization and the lot number. So you can see this one we dated for July 4th, and lot number was 42, which would have been the sterilization run that will correspond to autoclave logbook. So you want to date it with the date of sterilization and the lot number. Before use, you want to check the indicator marking. So you can see here the package on the left, it did turn brown like it was supposed to. However, when the person pulled them out, you can see there's still watermarks on there. If it's wet, that's considered a break in sterility, and the packages actually are not sterile if they come out of the autoclave wet. If they're torn, if they're punctured, if they're burnt, those are all considered breaks in sterility. We would have to open up, reprocess, and repackage and re-sterilize everything before we can use it. You can see on the right-hand side, there's a little tiny 16 gauge threaded end that popped out the back of the paper package. These paper packages are pretty cheap. They're not, they're not super expensive. They're meant to be used once and thrown away. They're paper. 16 gauge threaded end is pointy, and it breaks through the back. It happens a lot. It's not anything to be ashamed of. Open it up, repackage, re-sterilize, and go on about your day. There are some alternatives to having a sterilizer in the shop. You can have pre-sterilized disposable tools. It must be marked with the method of sterilization and with the expiration date. Section 8.7 of BAMC says that an autoclave, ultrasonic, or sterilization room or area is not required if the body art establishment uses only pre-sterilized disposable instruments, pre-sterilized body art materials, and pre-sterilized supplies. So if you are 100% disposable, in the body art model code, we're not requiring you to have a sterilization room as long as everything you get is pre-sterilized from the factory. You want to store your sterilized equipment in an area that is away from pedestrian access, in an area where it's not going to be exposed to dust or moisture or temperature and humidity extremes. I love storing my stuff in these Craftsman toolboxes. The one I have this stainless steel one here on this slide right now. I've probably had this thing for 10 years. It looks like I bought it yesterday. They hold up really well. It's not going to get bashed around. God forbid my roof leaked and it got onto the top of it. Some water got on top of it. It's not going to get inside of my toolbox, so it keeps everything nice away from dust and moisture and everything else, and nobody's touching it. There's also no non-sterilized items in my drawers where we have the sterilized tools. So you only want to store sterilized items with other sterilized items. We don't want to put anything there that's not sterile. You are going to have to maintain your sterilization equipment. So you have regular cleaning. Every autoclave has their own brand of full system clean. So Tuttenhauer will have a Tuttenhauer clean. Pelton & Crane has a Pelton & Crane clean. You have to make sure you're using the correct autoclave cleaner for the autoclave that you're using. If you use the wrong product to clean the autoclave, you can have a problem and you can really damage your autoclave. You also want to do regular sport testing. The AMC calls for sport testing every week. So you want to do regular sport testing. And you also want to have an annual safety inspection. So you can see there on the right-hand side, somebody will come into your shop that is factory authorized to work on that specific brand of autoclave, and they will do an annual inspection, and they'll put a sticker on the side saying they came 2024, and they're due again in July 2025, a year from the day that they came. All right, if anybody has any questions, you can click the QR code. You can scan the QR code on the left-hand side, and that goes onto my my tattoo shop website. And on the right-hand side, I do have a medical supply company called Earthrise Supply, and that QR code will scan and bring you there.
And fantastic presentation, Mike. You guys, that is honestly some awesome information coming from a very skilled body piercer. But now I get to share the portion about understanding tattoo machines. So my name is Ben Shaw. I am a 24-year tattoo artist. 14 of those years I have been a business shop owner. But I'm also really involved with previously my state and now federal regulation. I'm also a member of the APT, the Alliance of Professional Tattooists. Working to educate the industry, all body art members, as well as those in all spheres about everything tattoo related. Now, for those of you who are going to walk into a tattoo shop and you're going to look at what's being used, you're going to find two main types of technology in the tattoo realm. That is a rotary machine and a coil tattoo machine. Now, just brief, just so you know, the technology that it was the foundation for our tattoo equipment was actually created by Thomas Jefferson. I'm sorry, Thomas Edison, where he created the electric stencil pen, which was now the current rotary tattoo machine, and the electric door knocker, which is the current coil tattoo machine. Now you're going to find a lot more tattoo artists today are using the rotary style tattoo equipment because of its use and ease. It's a lot easier to clean and use and tune. And just to give you some examples of what they look like, to the left, you're going to see two coil machines, and on the right-hand side, you're going to see a few different variations of a rotary machine. Now, if you can kind of see, there's a lot of parts in that coil machine that come together. Now, there's a lot of those pieces that need to be perfectly tuned for the machine to operate optimally. On the right-hand side, the rotary machine, you push a button and turn it on, and that's has a fixed motion. And here's a more illustration of how many different parts are in a tattoo coil machine that would require a perfect alignment for operation, as opposed to the rotary machine, which has very few parts. Now, we're all here to learn about disinfection and sterilization. So if for some reason I need to clean, deep clean my coil machine beyond just the general maintenance of cleaning, I would have to fully pull it apart. And as you can see, I'd have to take it into its individual parts and really get in there with a hospital grade disinfectant and then sanitize it with some rubbing alcohol. If I, for some reason, need to get into a rotary machine, all it would require is two Allen keys and I'm able to take it apart. So this is good to illustrate is you're going to still see coil machines out there. You're still going to hear them. Whenever you think about a tattoo machine or a tattoo shop, you hear that loud buzzing. That is a coil machine. But you're going to realize them less and less. You're going to see more people using the rotary style technology. And here's just an illustration, and this is going to be fun for you guys. I'm going to play with your brains a little bit because of I made a rookie mistake and sent a improper video. But you're going to see two different setups. On the left, you're going to see the coil machine getting put together in a way that optimizes safety and sanitation with proper barriers, and then you're going to see a rotary style setup in reverse, right? But just to show the coil machine is in double time, and the rotor machine is in real time. So you can see the amount of work that goes into just setting them up. Now, this is what kind of plays into a lot of tattoo artists leaning more towards the rotary style technology because of its ease of use. Traditionally, when we would start tattooing, 10, 20 years ago, you had to know all the parts of your coil machine. Now, all you have to do is purchase a rotary and push a button and it starts. But as you can see, there was quite a bit more activity that was required, even though the rotary isn't backwards. And again, just wanted to show a properly sanitary setup for setting up a coil machine. And it's important to illustrate that, again, this is a sanitary setup. And I'm using the word sanitary and disinfection in these areas and not sterilization, because at no point is a tattoo procedure a sterile procedure. It is a sanitary procedure. And again, you can see there's a lot less, there's no clip cord required for the rotor machine, which again makes it more of an option for a lot of tattoo artists today. Now, I just want to parlay into that is, here in a minute when Heather gets on, she's going to give us a great breakdown of these definitions. But it's important for you all to know that a tattoo artist can disinfect and sanitize their machine, but they're not sterilizing it. Meaning we're not taking that coil tattoo machine or that rotor machine and putting it into an autoclave sterilizer or a Statum, because that would destroy it. Right? We are able to take the parts of the machine apart. We're able to disinfect them effectively and then sanitize them and put them back together and then put proper barrier over them. So that way, again, it's a clean and safe procedure. And we're not sterilizing the machine parts, but we are sterilizing something. And the only two things that are sterilized, or the things that you're going to find sterilized on a tattoo machine, are the tubes. Now here you can see to your left is a coil machine in a stainless steel tube, and on the right is a rotary wand and a aluminum tube. And here's them just pulled off of the machine themselves. These are the only two parts that are actually going to be going through that process that Mike really took us through earlier about packaging and then running through an autoclave sterilizer. Now, to get more into the stainless steel tube, which you're going to see in the field, but a lot less because of the amount of maintenance required on them. You see, to fully sterilize a stainless steel tube, you have to pull it all apart. There's three different parts to it: a tube, tip, and grip, and they're held together with a little Allen key. During the tattoo procedure, tattoo ink mixed with blood or other OPM could potentially have slid back into the grooves of the tube, which will need to be disassembled and fully cleaned, scrubbed, run through an ultrasonic before bagged, and then run through that autoclave. Now, that's a lot. So a lot of tattoo artists are opting to move into the disposable realm, right? And so here's just a few different, well, two different examples of what a stainless steel tube and a disposable tube look like. A lot more choosing this because it is easy just to bypass the entire autoclave process. Now, a lot of the tattoo artists today, if you didn't notice, are using the older coil machines are heavy, and so that stainless steel tube is really effective to balance the weight on your hand. Right, you have a big heavy coil machine on your back of your hand. You have a stainless steel tube on the front. It can balance it. And when you have a plastic disposable tip or disposable tube, I'm sorry, that machine weight is pulled back, which causes wrist issues. So again, these are just some of those reasons why people are leaning more towards the rotary machine. And I just want to give you a few different examples of other looking, basically just different colors of disposable tubes. But again, these are the ones that most tattoo artists are kind of leaning away from. Now here's just two different rotary style grips. The one to the left would be attached to that first rotor machine that has a clamp on it. It has a stem which would allow the needle bar to travel, and then you can attach a cartridge to the top of it. And then the image in the middle is the same as the one to the right. That would attach to the wand. And this is fully disposable, and its weight is comparable to that aluminum wand grip. So again, it makes it more of a optimal option for tattoo artists. Now, briefly, I said there's two things that need to be sterilized in the tattoo machine process. One is the tube, and there's the needles. Now, when I first started tattooing 24 years ago, I was coming out of an era that tattoo needles you could re-sterilize and you could run them through a cleaning process and then reuse them. I never did. Just a disclaimer, I never got involved with that. But now all tattoo needles are one-time use, and they all come to us pre-packaged, pre-sterilized, and pre-ready to rock and roll. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see some of the more traditional coil machine style needles on bars. These are needle groupings that are soldered onto a needle bar. On the left-hand side, you're going to see this predominantly dominating the industry today. Cartridges are so much easier to use. One tattoo machine, you could use one tattoo machine and 4 different cartridges all intersect or are interchangeable with it, making it an option to not have to have a plethora of machines out there. Now, most of these, well, all of these are going to come to us pre-sterilized through EO gas. And then on the back of the cartridge package, you can see that it was properly sterilized with EO gas. Now, Michael had said if a shop is getting everything pre-sterilized, pre-packaged, pre-ready to go, they don't require these next 2 slides. But I just wanted to show a tattoo shop, my shop's clean and dirty area. This is a area that we have completely separate. We have a dedicated sink for that, as well as you can see we have an ultrasonic there. And then we have a nifty little pass-through door, which then leads into our sterilization area. That's where we use the autoclave. Once the tubes are completed under their sterilization process, we leave them till they're fully dry, and afterwards we put them into that sealable container with only sterilized tools within it. So I kind of explained the 2 main technologies which you're going to see in the tattoo shop is the rotor machine and the coil machine. You're going to see more rotaries. There was a whole era of loyal to the coil is starting to die away because as you tattoo for a long time, it gets heavy and it hurts your wrist. But hopefully you now understand what needs to be sterilized versus what doesn't. This information could arm you as you step into a tattoo studio and just have more successful interactions with tattoo artists, knowing their tools a little bit better. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I look forward to answering any questions after Heather's presentation. Thank you. And I can't mute myself.
Thank you, Ben and Michael, for your wonderful presentations. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Heather Woods. I have been a regulator for Southern Nevada Health District since 2015. And Michael and Ben gave a great presentations leading into sterilization, and I'm going to now lead you into the inspector's view. Let me see this. Sadie, can you advance it for me, Sadie? All right, thank you. Just a quick disclaimer. We as regulators, we're here to protect and promote public health. So anything that I say here is also going to be reflected upon the Body Art Model Code of 2024. And then also, this is great information to refer to when you need referencing, and then your jurisdiction may lead to something different. And we're going to go over some definitions for sterilization. So Michael and Ben went over some great information for these definitions. I just wanted to reiterate a couple of them. Basically, sterilization means the valid process used to render a product free from viable microorganisms. Michael went over a great example of the sterilization and what it's used for. And sterilization logs are important for us regulators. They're the physical or digital recording for the autoclave number, as well as a sterilizer, load number, contents, and it can also include the operator's name, initials, and time and date, and also the biological and chemical monitoring, excuse me. And then also the cycle number, that's the identifier, sometimes known as a lot number, as Michael previously mentioned. Here are two examples of sterilization rooms. As Michael iterated previously, there are the following requirements. They must be used only for cleaning, disinfecting, sterilizing, storage, and related tasks. Sink must be used only for cleaning contaminated instruments. It's not used as a hand sink. Must be a ultrasonic cleaner or instrument washer included. And any items stored in the room should have cabinets or drawers made that are smooth and non-porous, wipeable. No other services are included. No tattooing, piercing, or related retail sales occur in that room. The covered ultrasonic machine and the sink are used for rinsing and scrubbing contaminated instruments. They must be separate from the autoclave to prevent contamination. So you can have like a plexiglass or a stainless steel barrier, other non-porous barrier to prevent cross-contamination. And with that being said, as regulators walking in and observing the sterilization room, on the right is Michael's great example for his sterilization room. On the left, here's an example. We're going to walk in and we're looking, observing. And as you can see, we have the ultrasonic machine underneath the gloves, which you can bring the potential for cross-contamination to the operator or your artist and move those gloves to a better location. So that way the aerosolization of the ultrasonic machine doesn't contaminate those gloves. And also you can provide a barrier between the ultrasonic machine and the autoclave there. Now we're going to get into what we usually see when we walk into a body art facility. The most common types of equipment you will see here are these usually two types. There are other types of equipment out here, but this is the most common that we run into. And the left, we have the Statim, where the Statim is a little bit different than the autoclave itself. So a Statim usually has a shorter cycle times, like 6 to 9 minutes. It's more compact design, and they're recommended to have more frequent spore testing. They have a task well for their distilled water, and there's a little bit more maintenance involved. Whereas the autoclave, their cycle time is usually a little bit longer, 15 to 30 minutes. Their load cycle is larger. Their recommended spore testing is a little less frequent and may have a direct connection to water with a lower maintenance. So it's good to ask your operators what they, what their preference is, why their preference is, and it depending on their studio, their frequency use is what they're going to have in their studio. So you're going to observe different ones when you walk in there. So prior to use, as an operator participating in disinfecting and sterilization, Michael gave a great explanation, procedural for cleaning your tools, which was a wonderful demonstration for us all to see. And also they're going to, after they go through that process, they let it dry, they're going to put their reusable tools in a sterile pack, packaging the tools properly to achieve the maximum use of surface area when they're sterilized. Then they're put into the machine, and then after they've been cleaned and run, you're going to go back, they're going to go back, the artist is going to label, date, cycle, noting and packaging, the indicator strips, they're going to review those. Information is also then transferred into their log, which we're going to go into in a minute, and identifying all the markers that need to be met for sterility, and then put as Michael and Ben said, you're going to store them in the proper location designed for your sterile equipment. And they also mentioned, again, if they don't use reusable equipment, and they don't have to have a sterilization room. A lot of facilities are doing that as well. So I mentioned the integrator strips. These go in with each cycle. So the integrator is a test or a device designed to validate one or more of the following criteria, like Michael mentioned: time, temperature, steam, and pressure. These types of integrators can be chemical, biological, mechanical. And then on the right, we have our spore testing. They're usually, the spore testing assesses the killing of Geobacillus spores, highly resistant. These spores are highly resistant to heat and typically used for a biological indicator for sterilization. It's important that these are used consecutively when trying to achieve your sterilization, because the integrator identifies sterilization was achieved during each cycle. The spore test verifies the recommendation is weekly, that there's no pathogenic contamination. And when the indicators, there's different type of integrators. Like this one, it shows that it hit the pass line. And Michael, reiterating what Michael said, making sure that it met all the parameters. There's no damage to the packagings, the packs, there's no water or anything like that. And then also it has met the criteria in the pass line. Otherwise, rerun the cycles again. This is an example of a spore test. When you're doing your inspection, you can go back and look and ask for your spore test. These spore tests are recommended to be done weekly. They're verified through an independent laboratory. Some of them will have a local laboratory, and some of them will run the spore test and then mail it off to the laboratory. These records are to be maintained for a minimum of 3 years. The most recent year is to be maintained on site, yet all 3 should be available upon request. If you were to get a positive test, there are guidelines that you can review, an 8.11 of the BAMC. Well, now that we have some kind of idea of what we're looking for as regulators, we're going to look what happens when this applies to an artist ready to perform their artwork with a client. After when the client comes in, the artist gives them a consent form, and on that consent form, they're going to document some information. It's important that they document like the type of body art procedure, the location on the body where it's going to happen, the design if it's applicable, and if jewelry size. And then they're also going to put the tools that they're using, which tools, the sterile equipment, the expiration date, lot number, and then anything that's going to be applied on the skin will be used for the consent form. This kind of is helpful if there were an infection or an outbreak for us as regulators, if the FB department have to get them all for the sterilization documentation. This refers back to the consent form, can lead us back to our equipment that was used, which leads back to our log. So it's a great reference material that we can all go back and look at for a process of elimination. Most body art inspection is a risk-based inspection through practice, but sterilization allows verification of sterility through documentation. It's important as a regulator to build that relationship with your artist or industry, so that way we can have a good communication skills. So when we're in there as a regulator, to ask our artist or our operator to verbally or physically demonstrate a sterilization process. And it's helpful as a regulator to actively listen. As previously Michael and Ben stated, there's more than one way to do the process. So actively listen has us a great opportunity to listen to what they're doing, how they're doing their process, and understanding their flow and ensuring that they're meeting all the parameters to protect for public health. And I always encourage any kind of research or trainings that you can attend. And I want to thank everybody for attending. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat and I'll turn it over to Sadie. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Ben and Mike. Yeah, I just have a few announcements and then we'll get into the questions. There are a lot of great questions in the Q&A box, so keep dropping them in there if you do have additional ones. But just some things to note. So the AEC, the 2025 AEC, we do have our call to abstracts open for NEHA. So that'll be open until September 27th. So if you're working on body art in your area and you want to present about it, do a joint presentation, or talk about other things within environmental health, please submit an abstract. All right, next thing, we have a great newsletter. So we'll have information about upcoming webinars similar to this one, new job aids that are coming out. So really encourage you to subscribe. I will note there was a little snafu with our subscriber list. So if you subscribe, but you're like, I haven't gotten a email in a while, maybe try resubscribing. We'd love to get you on that list and keep you up to date with all the information we have available for you. All right, and last but not least, if you do enjoy this webinar, other webinars that NEHA puts on, we do encourage you to check out what it would mean to become a member, and if that's something that you'd be interested in. I'll have information to all of this in the chat. I'll drop it in there right now, so you can check out all the great resources we have for you. All right. And without further ado, I'll stop sharing because I know we have a lot of questions for y'all and want to get through as many as possible. So just starting off, there was a question, there are several questions about using ultrasonic cleaners, if you have to use that what the body art model code requires, or if manual cleaning, maybe soaking prior to sterilization would be a sufficient substitute for in replace of using an ultrasonic.
Yes, so I can answer that one. You can hand scrub your tools. You should always pre-soak them with an enzymatic cleaner. Some piercers will put them into like a soak basin in their procedure room, and then the end of the day they'll bring everything into the sterilization area. I call it the bio room, but at the end of the day they'll bring it into the bio room. However, an ultrasonic is the best way. I've recently found that Harbor Freight sells an amazing ultrasonic. They sell two of them. The metal one is like $160. You can put a warranty on it for 2 years. Realistically, for 160 bucks, I'm not scrubbing anything. If there's a machine that's going to do it and it's going to cut out, an hour of my life, I'm going to use the machine. However, if you don't have it, you can sit there and you fill the biosync up with water and the enzymatic cleaner, and you put your gloves on, your PPE, and you get in there with a brush and you start hand scrubbing your tools very gently under the water. Personally, I don't like to do that. I'll use the ultrasonics, every single time. But if the piercer doesn't have one, you could theoretically hand scrub your tools.
Thank you, Mike. And similar to that, still talking about sterilization, a question about expiration date for sterilized items in-house.
The BAMC does not give an expiration date. It only tells you that you have to mark with the date of sterilization. Every county or county jurisdiction, whatever it is going to have a different requirement. So make sure you look up in your own state regs what they are.
Great, thank you. Okay, question for you, Ben. Despite the complex setup, what are the advantages of using a coil machine?
The advantages of a coil machine. Well, I mean, that is going to be into a very specific, subjective person's experience. As I mentioned, there was a coil machine was what we've been using for the past century. So a lot of tattoo artists have been using it in their apprenticeships. They have to learn all the independent pieces and how they go together. And there's ways that you can have more control over the throw, the give, whether you're setting up a machine that it hits a little harder, a little softer if you want to do some color packing or some shading. Now, in my presentation, I mentioned they're very heavy and cumbersome, and there's a lot of moving parts that require that tuning, which is kind of becoming a lost art. But there are still some tattooers that love that ability. But because of the access of rotor machines being so, I mean, just for lack of a bit, so good, right? Some of these rotor machines come out that are, like my current rotary wand has the ability to give more give when it senses it and relax when it doesn't need as much tension itself, right? I can change the speed with the curve of my hand. It's a lightweight, and there's no cord attached to it. Um, so the real answer is why would somebody use a coil is they're just used to it more and they like the way it feels, but it's slowly but surely disappearing out of the industry to where many of my peers are even questioning if it's a continued fundamental in tattoo apprenticeships. I think it should be, but that's personal preference. But otherwise, it's really a subjective choice by the artist.
Thanks, Ben. Interesting to see that shift. Thanks for perspective. A question about if is there somewhere, a website or something similar we can refer permit holders to go to for hazardous waste removal?
So I can answer that. Every state is going to be different. So here in Florida, you have to be a licensed biomedical waste transporter in order to take the biomedical waste out from the tattoo and body piercing facility and really any medical facility. So it's going to be somebody who, I mean, you pop it into Google, biohazardous waste transporter and see what comes up in your state. Because every state's going to be different.
Thank you. Another one for you, Ben. Is it possible for an artist to bag their usable grip and wrap it and change the bag if they cannot sterilize, for example, if they're at a tattoo show?
I was reading that question and just more clarity. So taking a stainless steel tube and just uh, autoclaving it. I'm sorry, what was the?
Yeah. So is it possible for an artist to bag the reusable grip, wrap it, and then change the bag and then wrap it if they cannot sterilize? So I'm guessing they're saying wrap
Oh,
it in substitution of sterilizing.
no, no. No, good gracious, no, no. I mean, once a reusable, say, grip or tube is used during the process, and that procedure is over, it's not contaminated. It needs to go through a sterilization process. Yeah, there's no rewrapping it. So no, no, it needs to be either if it's in a tattoo show, put into some sort of container they're going to be able to transport back, which again, that can be another discussion, or it needs to be disposable, which many tattoo shows are really leaning on and gently suggesting that most tattoo artists bring disposable only equipment.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then Ben and Mike, there's been a few questions going throughout about the practicality of using disposable equipment, both for piercing and tattooing. If you could both speak to that, and Heather, if you have any insight as an inspector, what you're seeing, if you're seeing a shift of more disposable in the last few years.
I can answer that. We have a lot of temporary events that happen here, and when those events, they're usually all disposable when they're doing something like that. That way it's easy to take and carry with them, and they can dispose of it at the event, and they usually have their red bags or their sharps container, and then the event just has a biohazard unit that comes and dispose of that. I don't know how it is everywhere else, but it's kind of a mix and vary here. Mostly the piercers use reusable equipment, and then tattoo artists are using disposable equipment.
So for the practicality of it for piercing, it it's it depends on how much money you have to start up. So if when you're building out your studio, if you have the money for an autoclave and a sterilization room, and to supply metal tools, then it's going to be cheaper to do metal tools. However, if you're going to have to start re-sterilize those tools and reprocess them, disposable tools are going to cost more money in the long run, because every time you're throwing something away, it could have cost you 50 cents, a dollar, like whatever it is. So it does cost you a little bit more money in the long run using disposable tools. However, you don't have to clean disposable tools, you just throw them in the garbage. So it really just depends on your business model. And you can do a little bit of both. You can say, hey, I'm going to use pre-sterile needles, I'm going to use pre-sterile tapers, throw the tapers away. Maybe I'll use pre-sterile receiving tubes, throw the receiving tubes away, but I like metal clamps, so I'm going to sterilize my metal clamps. So you can do a mixture of that as well. It just kind of depends on your business model. But as one guy says here, it doesn't work well for all procedures. It does not work well for all procedures. So plastic tools, are great because you can throw them out, but you're not going to get the same feel as a metal tool. We do sell disposable metal tools as well that are pre-sterilized, but they are, they're costly. It's not something cheap because then you're just sterilizing the same metal tool you're going to be buying to re-sterilize, but you're just going to be throwing it out. So, they're not the cheapest right now to get disposable metal tools. But there's a lot of really good plastic ones. We sell all the stiletto stuff, and that stuff's amazing. It works really well. So, it's hit and miss. Just depends on your business model and what you want to do and how you pierce.
And to build off of that for the tattooing side, as I mentioned in the presentation, that with rotary style machines being so prevalent, we do have so many good options and pretty reasonable prices for them, because the industry is drastically, like Heather said, you're seeing more of that in the tattoo realm. So they're not overly cumbersome in price, and they're coming out with grips that are ergonomic and work really well for our hands because they don't need to be so heavy, because the rotary style machines are very light. So I think you're just going to see more of that in the tattoo realm, because you also bypass this entire presentation, right? You wouldn't need any of that sterilizing equipment for disposable shops. So.
Gotcha. Thank you. There are lots of questions about sterilization procedures. We may need to do a separate webinar on that as well. But one about the consent form, Heather, I know you touched on that a bit, but should prepackaged or disposable items also be documented in case of a breakout from the distributor, or where would that information be kept in the studio?
Usually, when you're using disposable equipment, as a regulator, we're going in and just verifying the equipment is not expired, going and looking at the needles and the inks or whatever you're looking at. If it's a disposable facility, we're just making sure that everything is within the allotted time of sterility that has been given on that package. And if it is expired, then it has to be immediately discarded so that they're not doing anything. But on the consent form, as of putting on the consent form, there is nothing stating in the BMC saying that it needs to be recorded on the consent form. I don't know if that's something that would be of concern, as long as they're using it and the package is not damaged, it's within the allotted amount of time for sterility. Other than that, no, there's nothing they need to put on the consent form other than what the body art procedure is, where it's at in the design if needed.
Thank you. And what question is cold sterilization using some chemicals that are acceptable for jewelry during piercing? I think the question is that an acceptable practice?
There is no acceptable practice to cold sterilize jewelry. Cold sterilization is only used in hospitals to disinfect like endoscopes and stuff that you can't put in an autoclave because it's a $20,000 camera and you're going to break it in an autoclave. That's the only thing that cold sterilization is used for. The chemicals are highly carcinogenic and you need to have exhaust fumes and different PPE. It's nothing we should be doing in the tattoo shop at all.
Thank you. I know we only have a few minutes left, but there are lots of questions about autoclaves versus statums and sterilizing jewelry and needles. And then it's, a cassette style autoclave before you're piercing. Mike, would you mind touching on that a bit and what that could look like in a piercing studio?
Yeah, so real quick in a nutshell, there is no different. A Statum is an autoclave. It's just a brand of autoclave. So whether it be a Statum, an NBO, a Tuttenhauer, a Pelton and Crane, they're all autoclaves. They all sterilize. They can all be in. I personally don't like to have my autoclave in the bio room because if I have to work on my autoclave, I want the whole outside of it to be clean. So I'll have the autoclave right outside the bio room. So everything in the bio room is dirty. And then I just walk right outside, put everything into my autoclave and sterilize it there. It can be in the piercing room, it can be right outside on a shelf. There's no difference between, like I said, the Statum or any other brand of autoclave. They're all autoclaves. And then somebody also asked here if you saw stains on the packaging. Yeah, if you see stains on packaging, that's considered a break in sterility. No matter if the stain is dried, it's still a break in sterility, and you need to open it up, repackage, and reprocess. Somebody also asked why there's not a hand wash. Like, should you wash your hands in the bio room? Like, you should not touch the biosync with your hands at all. That's only for decontaminating tools. If you put your hands on it, now your hands are contaminated. So you shouldn't be washing your hands in the sterilization room. You should be washing your hands in a hand washing sink. You should be cleaning your tools in the sink in the sterilization room or the bio room.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification. There are two questions about backflow with the needle cartridges. Ben, could you touch on how you test for backflow?
Well, is there ink in the back? Basically, does ink flow backwards? Up till, I mean, when cartridges just started coming out, a lot of them didn't have that membrane in the back. It was literally just a clear case with a needle fixed and a little rubber band on it. And so we were experiencing, as soon as you lean your arm backwards, you're going to have flow coming backwards. You would find tattoo ink in the components of whether it's the needle bar of a coil machine or the needle extended bar of a rotary as well. Since then, that has been a big complaint from the tattoo community, and so you're not going to find any more. I mean, I'm sure they exist, right? I'm sure if you buy cheap cartridges on Amazon, you're going to find some that don't have membranes, but they all do consistently have them. Any reputable manufacturer. And that's again what the APT is all about, is always trying to educate tattoo artists on what manufacturers, not trying to, point to specific ones, but what are some of the practices they use, and the equipment and the ethics that they provide the creation of their equipment to make sure the tattoo artists are purchasing those. So if there's any ink on the back, there's no membrane, and they shouldn't be using those ink cartridges. Or needle cartridges, sorry.
There's so many great questions. Yes, we will get a list of all of the questions. We'll send them out and touch on the ones that we didn't have time to get to. Just one more question that was asked a few times. Sharpie pens and other office pens, are they acceptable as used for marking? I know there was a question about using a stencil as well, like for cosmetic tattooing, and if you can reuse that. If y'all wouldn't mind touching on that as the last question.
Whatever you use has to be single one-time use, and you throw it out. So
Yes.
whether you're doing permanent makeup or tattooing or piercing, whatever you're doing, one use, one customer. We actually give our pens to the customer. It has our name like on them. We have them custom imprinted and just give it to the customer as a gift. So one time, one use, throw it away. That's it.
Thank you.
And build off that, yeah, we've actually been able to purchase sterilized pens, again, one-time use, and they're, again, because we're using so much of them, they're getting cost effective. But I do know from our recent PDTT, the Prevention of Disease and Tattooing, Transmission and Tattooing, that Sharpie actually made an announcement that they noticed that a lot of tattoo artists are using them, so they're acceptable. And just as Mike said, though, they can use them on the skin. They're not very harmful, but you can only use it that one time and then toss them afterwards.
Thank you. I think it's important to clarify. Well, thank you all for taking the time to join. I want to give a special thank you to Heather, Ben, and Mike for putting all your time, a lot of time into creating these presentations. This information is clearly very needed, so I'm happy we were able to get that out there. And thank you all. Like I said, if you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, please do. Then you'll hear about the next webinar we have going on, and have a great rest of your day. See you at the next one.